There is a lot of interest in the woodworking community on sharpening. I mean, it's one of the most common subjects of YouTube videos when people just start getting into YouTube, and it's something us, people that have been out there for over a decade, kind of return to quite a bit. In fact, I've got quite a few videos out there on sharpening. And a lot of them, it's kind of this deal that we kind of pick one specially. I kind of like my diamond stone, so I kind of stick with them. And that's the general rule of thumb, is pick a system and stick with it. But what a lot of us kind of forget is there are a lot of different tools out there that we sharpen. It's not just chisels, saws, and plane blades. And so today I thought I'd put together 5 quick tips on sharpening that maybe haven't been covered so much. Now, call me lazy, but I do not think every single tool I own needs to be taken to a mirror finish at both sides to get the perfect, never-ending linear vector to create a sharp edge, stroping to 16,000, all that kind of stuff. My pocket knife, which I use for opening boxes and just kind of rough work, I've even hit it with a hammer, does not need to be that sharp. Neither does the blade on my lawnmower. And as a woodworker, you're going to become supposedly an expert in sharpening, so you're going to be sharpening all those things. Shoot, even my kitchen knives, I don't take that extreme. In fact, I heard a story from a pretty famous woodworker teacher that he was showing some doctors how to sharpen the chisels, and they were saying they don't even take their scalpels as sharp as we woodworkers take our chisels a lot of times. So there's kind of a rough, medium, fine in my mentality, a recurring theme in woodworking, to sharpening, and these kind of tools, they can be rough. As such, we can turn to somewhat of a modern technology that our grandparents just didn't have access to make life a little bit easier for getting those rougher, sharp tools. Carbide. Now, my example of carbide is this universal sharpener from Chestnut Tools. And basically, it's just a little pocket knife that holds a carbide bit, which has very squared off on the end. And yes, diamonds can resharpen carbide, but these kind of things are generally thought of as disposable. And I know that I bought this thing from Lee Valley, leevalley.com, and they sell replacement blades right here for when they do wear out. But I don't use it that much, so I'm sure that's probably going to last my lifetime. And the idea behind this is these are scrapers. Most of the time when we're using sandpaper or diamond stones or water stones or something like that, we are braiding the metal away very slowly to get down so that to that edge that we want. These kind of tools just scrape the metal away, so they can be a lot more aggressive, but for a tool like this, my Buck 110, I'm not too concerned about it. Though, when you use these things, be warned. All the marketing literature has the pictures, they show them. The idea is that you're going to be taking the edge, putting it right there, and then leaning it a little bit, like 10 degrees, just like a card scraper on wood, and then just scraping it away. So all the pictures show these tools, whether it's a lawnmower blade, kitchen shears, scissors like that, or knives like this, being positioned like that. Does anybody see a problem with doing this? Yeah, the cutting edge. It's one of those situations where marketers got hold and just want to kind of take pretty pictures and they don't really think about it. You never want to slice towards your hands. Turn the edge away from the tool. Plus the fact that if you do that one, as you move forward, the natural tendency is to angle it so that the shaving goes off the edge, not back towards the edge, so that you can get a sharper blade. And basically what you do is you place the tool right here. Again, you will tilt it up, angle it about 10 degrees, and then just scrape away the metal. A few swipes, you don't have to be too precious, and there you go. Same thing on the other side. Just use the other side of the blade, and I will right it up, tilt it about 10 degrees, and then just scrape the edge. And you will be surprised at how sharp that edge will be. And you can see it's taking off metal shavings. Can you see that? Which is fairly aggressive, but the edge it leaves is exceptionally workable. I picked mine up a few years ago after an article of Christopher Schwartz, because he uses this for his card scrapers, and it just sits right here or inside that box all the time. And that really has become my go-to sharpener for my rough tools. For example, my lawnmower blade, though I might take more than 1 or 2 swipes on that kind of stuff, but it really does remove, you know, rust, all that kind of stuff, and gets a sharper edge that came from the factory. And for my pocket knife, yeah, every few weeks, a new edge. While advances in technology to create that carbide is new to our generation, or popularly new to our generation, slicing an edge instead of braiding it is not new. That's something your great-grandfather used to do all the time, except they used a tool called a mill file. And this is going to be somewhat controversial how I use it, and I've done it in a past video that got me a lot of flack, but I'm going to show you again. Card scrapers seem to be one of those tools that a lot of people struggle with getting sharp, and I'm here to tell you it doesn't take too much to do it. And a lot of times when you see me in videos using my card scraper, you might notice in the corner I have a mill file on my workbench, because I don't use my card scraper to get the ultimate finish. I do know a lot of people that do. Generally what happens is I will use a hand plane over like a tabletop or something like that, and invariably there's going to be, you know, a few, 2 to 4 inch square sections that has a little bit of tear out. And to me, this is the perfect tool for taking care of that and not leaving scallops everywhere. Because even with my hand planes, a lot of times I'm going to hit the tabletop with something like 320 or 400 grit. You don't need to go any coarser than that when you plane properly, but it just kind of evens it out a little bit. And if there are any ridges anywhere on the tabletop, it will catch them before I put finish on. That's just my way of doing it. And to me, the card scraper, because I'm going to be sanding at 320 or 400, is a little bit more of a medium to rough tool, just getting rid of the tear out. Hence, I just need to have some kind of burr on there. And if it is a little bit ragged or serrated, so much the better. So what I have is I have my mill file right here. And real quickly, let me remove the burr with some sandpaper. So rounded it over, taking it off. This is not taking shavings. So I come over here, I hold the mill file down, I hold it straight up at 90 degrees, and I just take a few swipes. Yeah, I know it only cuts one direction, but I go both directions. And you can see these are metal shavings. Hence, if you're doing this one, be sure never to touch your eye until you wash your hands, because you might have some microscopic shavings on your hand. But doing that right there created a very rough burr. And if you're doing fine work with a card scraper, leveling out intarsia or something like that, you're going to want to manipulate that burr with a burnisher. Take it off, put it on, round it over, that kind of stuff. But for rough work, here we go. You can just see I'm taking shavings. And when this burr goes away, guess what? New burr. More shavings. So your card sharpening tip. Don't stress about it getting too fine. If you don't need it to be fine, just work straight off of your mill file. For your third tip, I am going to return to stones. These being diamond, but I think it applies to water stones and oil stones. The tip, use wetter water. The idea behind wetting our stones is more than just lubrication. We're also wanting to get some liquid down in between the little grits so that any metal shavings aren't going to go to the bottom of it, and they can easily be swarfed away. They can be washed out easier. If you're using it on the dry stones, a lot of times those metal shavings can embed at the bottom of those grits, thus making the grits level, so it's not going to cut as well. And that's especially if you're using like soft metals like brass and stuff like that, which I would never recommend. That's what a mill file is for. You can clean those out. But even oil stones, you know, people I know will use kerosene or something like that as a little kind of flushing of the swarf away. And the idea is you don't want to use water, because water has some tension to it. It wants to bond together. You want to use wetter water, and that's kind of a reference to a famous science video out there. I like using Simply Green. Wetter water is basically like a soapy water that breaks up that water tension. So I like using Simply Green because I have a feeling it doesn't rust as easily. It is that wetter water. I think it's the smaller, it just gets in the cells a little bit more, but I don't flood it. I will basically do that right there, and then at the end of the session, I have my rag that I wipe it off, so the water doesn't stay on the stones. And because it kind of lifted the metal filings out, I'm cleaning off my stones for the next time I need to sharpen. So, tip number 3: don't use water. Use a wetter water. Soapy water, Windex. I prefer Simply Green. The next tip is really only going to be applicable to those of y'all that are lazy sharpeners or do a little bit of freehand sharpening. Because most jigs, they were going to, when you use them on the blade, they kind of lock you into moving in one direction. But if you just have it in your hand, you know, you find your bevel angle, you lift up a little bit, you can not only go in one direction. Right now, the scratch pattern is going this way, but I can occasionally move it around. I can do circles. And this used to be something that with the old oil stone sharpeners, that in use, they would come over and they would do a circle here, a circle there, they would circle here, circle there, then they would do a figure 8, and all that kind of stuff. Their goal was to even the wear over the entire stone. The side bend, what it was, they were constantly crossing over their hatch pattern. So they actually got a better edge that way. It wasn't serrated, it was just going all over the place. So that is the one advantage of using a freehanding technique every now and then, is you can be a lot more efficient because of better use of the hash pattern. And my 5th tip is kind of more a general tip that you can use anywhere in woodworking. Study everything and question everything, even the stuff you've seen in my own videos. That little tip about the cross hatch pattern, it only came to me because I watched a video from Christopher Schwartz probably 10 years ago of a very old gentleman who was sharpening a chisel in probably 10-15 seconds. And he did that kind of little circles here and there. And the cool thing about it was he was using the same oil stone that he had been using his entire life without ever having to flatten it. It was still flat to this day, even though all that sharpening he's done. Where most oil stones, they kind of get a dish in the middle because most people just go back and forth either with a jig or they've trained their hand to do that one, so they only wore out that one section. But what was remarkable was the speed that he sharpened it, and it kind of got me questioning, why was that? Well, that's where I came up with the idea that it was a cross pattern. Because even in my own sharpening, I found that when I was tuning up a lot of tools and doing backs of hundreds of tools, just going straight took forever. But if I was constantly changing the angle, I flattened quicker. And that was just because of repetitious, stupid, dumb luck of figuring that out. But questioning why on that earlier video kind of gave me that explanation. So question everything in woodworking, because I hate to break this to you, nothing in our craft is rocket science. In fact, most of the people that was doing this, 100, 150 years ago, A lot of times they were just drunk. They weren't educated. They couldn't count. In fact, if you've ever seen the old miter saws they have out there, they didn't put them in degrees. They put them in numbers. 90 degree was 2 because it cut the board into 2 parts. 30, they put a 3, 4, 5 to figure out how many parts would go in a circle, how many angles you needed, that kind of stuff. They broke it down really simple because the people back then couldn't figure out what 360 degrees was. This is not complicated stuff. If you just apply knowledge everywhere, question everything, but study everything at the same time, you'll advance your abilities pretty quickly. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, picked up a few tips and tricks. But remember, it's always worth the effort to learn, create stuff even though it's a low video, and share it with others. Be safe and have fun.